You're listening to the free version of the Patreon Party People podcast, which is released 1 month after it goes up for Patreon donors. If you want to stay up to date with the latest podcasts as soon as they are released, just visit patreon.com/blazehedgehog and pledge $1 or more. Now you might ask yourself, who would pay for a podcast? And you know what? Fair enough. I am but a single person, and doing all of this stuff, that means writing scripts, capturing footage, editing video, it all takes a lot of time and effort. And that's just one thing out of many creative pursuits that also take a lot of effort to produce. So don't think of Patreon as paying for a podcast. It's about giving me the security to keep providing you with more great stuff in the future. Plus, if you donate, you'll also get sneak peeks into whatever upcoming projects I'm working on, like work-in-progress versions of videos or beta builds of games I'm developing. Don't have a Patreon account? That's fine. You'll also find links to Ko-fi, PayPal, and even Amazon wishlists. Just visit patreon.com/blazehedgehog to learn more. One more time, that's patreon.com/blazehedgehog. Hello and welcome to the Patreon Party People podcast. It is September the 30th, 2020, and I am of course your host, Ryan Bloom. Hi, how you doing, everybody? I'd just like to apologize for this podcast being as late as it was. It really wasn't my intention to get it out, basically on the last day of the month. But you know, circumstances were what they were, and I kind of just couldn't help it. I actually started writing these podcast notes probably somewhere around like September 10th, maybe, September, well, probably even earlier than that, really. It was the sort of thing where, last month's podcast was a little bit late. I figured, okay, well, I'll just do kind of a light podcast, in a couple, 3 weeks, maybe. And then I started writing my notes, and they were really, really bare bones. As I mentioned, I think it was last month, I was recording for a Jurassic Park video, and I kind of got wrapped up in that, trying to figure out different emulators and things like that, because I have to record footage for that Jurassic Park video from game consoles that not only do I not own, but probably weren't really that popular in America. I'm having to record from the Amiga, the Spectrum, platforms like that. And it's actually kind of difficult to track down not only emulators for that stuff, but like setup guides. Because it's not like an NES emulator where you just, open the file and hit record on your recording program. These are like computer systems, so you need to sometimes do like extra setup to get those to work properly. And I still haven't even really fiddled around with an Amiga emulator yet, because, I'm assuming that's going to be on a measure of like installing Windows, basically. It's not really just going to be a plug and play sort of thing. Even just finding a setup guide is probably going to be quite a bit of a challenge, needless to say. So, I kind of got caught up in all that, and then Sage hit, the Sonic Amateur Games Expo. And I figured, that would be good podcast fodder, to talk about the games and everything. And then it ended up kind of being sort of a drag. I knew there were going to be a lot of games at Sage this year. I did not expect that there would be somewhere in the realm of 240 games. And I downloaded them all. I didn't play them all. There are 4 articles on bltn.net right now that you can go read about various fan games and indie games and, all this other stuff. But the real point of it all is that, I talk about enjoying writing about Sage because I kind of treat it as like a challenge to write about so many games in such a short amount of time. And I think I ended up overextending myself a little bit. Normally, back when I was working at TSSE, a single day's Sage articles would be anywhere from 5 to, at most, 7 games tops. Sometimes it'd be even less than that. Maybe it'd be like, 4 games per article. And that was fine. That was normal. That was acceptable. I considered that a lot of writing. And then for some reason on my own, I decided, hey, what if every article contained a minimum of 10 games? And very quickly, by the end of the second article, I was burned out. Because normally, not these last couple years, but we'll say, 2008 to, I don't know, 2015 or so, the maximum amount of games I would have to write about for TSSE was about 20 games per year. And with the way I'd set up my articles for BLTN.net, that 20 games was maybe about halfway through the amount I wanted to talk about. So I was pretty much burnt out by the end of the second article, and my articles ended up, going way past the Sage end date. Sage had been over for almost a week by the time I got the final article out. And it just kind of burned me out. I didn't feel like doing anything else after that for at least a few days. And, then we'll say like a week passes, I kind of recharge a little bit, I relax a little bit, and then other things start getting in the way. Just the other day, we got a notice that we were supposed to have like a bed bug inspection for our apartment. We've never had that happen before. We've lived here for 3 years. It's never really been a problem. We're hoping that like somebody else around the complex didn't call about having bed bugs. Because apparently, we're a really big apartment complex. I think I mentioned this before. Probably a good 200 people live here, all total. We have 5 or 6 different laundry rooms, 2 different pools, 3 different playgrounds. This apartment complex is practically a town into itself. It is so big and everyone is so tightly compacted. And, we've heard people, on the other side of the complex, way, way over probably 3 blocks away, and almost, that's not even much of a joke. I mean, it really is that far away. We've heard people way over there had bed bug problems years and years and years ago. So hopefully they haven't spread. Hopefully it was just like a routine thing. They were supposed to come through with like a bed bug sniffing dog, which is weird. What ended up happening is that was supposed to be for like the 27th or the 28th. They didn't show up on that date, so we ended up having to wait, extra days for the guy to finally come around. And when he did, he didn't have the dog. He was talking about all the problems he had been having, that of the apartments he'd been to already, only one of them was prepared to have a dog come in and sniff for bugs. And that it was just kind of like a big mess and a disaster and all this other stuff. So it was just this thing where I'm sitting here waiting all day for this guy to show up to, supposedly bring a dog in. They were saying, expect the dog to jump up on furniture. He'll jump up on beds, sniffing for bugs. And it just ended up being this guy with a flashlight. He kind of, he swept through each room, maybe 5 or 10 seconds each, just looking for feces, I guess, or something, just signs of bedbug intrusion where one might see that sort of thing. He didn't find anything and he left, which, that checks out. We don't have signs of bedbugs in our apartment, and hopefully in the future we do not develop signs of bedbugs in our apartment. And then, of course, yesterday we had to go grocery shopping, which was a whole ordeal in this pandemic, that requires sitting on a website for hours, digging through pages and pages of groceries, and then setting like a time to go pick it up. And just things eat up the day real quick, even though you don't want them to. So sorry that this podcast is so late. I really wanted it out at least a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, but just haven't found the time. I don't like, and also I'll just say, don't expect like any discussion of Sage in this podcast. We're far enough out from that. I burnt myself out from writing so many articles about it that if you really want to hear what I have to say about the Sonic Amateur Games Expo, just go to bltn.net. That is the letter B, letter L, letter T, letter N.net. 4 different articles. covers, what is it? It's like The Usual Suspects is the first article, which is about games that I myself was kind of excited to play, that, maybe I'd heard of outside of the context of Sage, that had appeared at previous stages. So, games like Sonic GT, I'm already blanking on what the rest of the games were. I just remember Sonic GT. I guess live on this podcast, I'll visit my own website and we'll see what is up. Because I know it was Sonic GT, and I at least very want to get like a sense of what I wrote about. Sonic Extreme, the Sonic Infinity engine for Unreal Engine 4, Sonic World, Sonic Freedom, Sonic Speed Course, games like that. And then the second article was like indie games, which is, self-explanatory. Oh, no. I got ahead of myself. The first article was Usual Suspects, games that I knew about, games that I wanted to play. Then it was fan games, which was just basically, me browsing around the website, seeing what looks interesting, and just trying random things, like Sonic Pinball Panics, Mega Man Perfect Blue, Sonic Galactic, Sonic Robo Blast. That's a kind of a remaster of the original SRB from, I don't know, it was like 1997, the really old fan game, getting kind of a nice looking modern remaster. It's pretty nice. Rayman Redemption was a game that I talked about. That was a pretty cool, again, sort of like a remastering effort. I likened Rayman Redemption to what Taxman and Stealth did for Sonic CD in 2011, except that Rayman Redemption is free and probably not entirely endorsed by Ubisoft. And then after the fan games article came the indie games article, which I talked about games like Sandro Gomez, Victory Heat Rally, Delta Gal, indie games. Not Sonic fan games, not Mega Man fan games, but, indie games. And then the final and fourth article, probably the biggest ever, I think I ended up talking about 30 games, 20 games, was just what I ended up calling the Sage Roulette. It was supposed to be honorable mentions for games that I thought looked interesting but couldn't fit into the other articles. But it ended up just me basically entering the remaining games into like a database and then just picking them at random. So that I wouldn't really favor games that looked nice. If that doesn't sound too rude, I just wanted to, just try out random stuff, maybe find things that wasn't really on my radar or didn't necessarily look good on the surface, just sort of pick whatever, try whatever, write about whatever. And I ended up doing 20 or 30 games in that final article. I did write shorter little blurbs about them. They weren't what I would consider full reviews. So that's kind of my excuse as to why I talked about so many games. But yeah, that was the 50 games I talked about at the Sonic Amateur Games Expo this year. Go read that article if you're interested. Other things on the docket today. I wanted to have the first episode of the new Dare to Scare ready to go on October 1st, and I don't think that's going to be happening. I'm working on a whole new logo treatment and intro, putting my camera to work and my light panels and things like that. Patreon subscribers have already seen kind of a preview of what that might look like. I basically have it all done and rendered out and ready to go. I just kind of need to pick the games and start recording. Rather than go nuts and then record a ton of different videos for a ton of different games like I did last year. I think last year was 5 or 6 different games. This year I'm going to be squeezing down because nobody really watches these Dare to Scare videos. I kind of just do them for my own sake because I want to play spooky games for Halloween. But there's no sense putting in all this effort and kind of dragging down the viewership on my channel if nobody's really watching this stuff. So, I'll still play some spooky games, but it's not going to be as many. I think the structure I'm trying to decide on is to do one retro game, do one indie game, and then do one really super popular, we'll say AAA game, maybe a famous game, something like that. So, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. That's going to be the structure for Dare to Scare. Is just one old game, one indie game, one new game. Simple, easy, digestible. And it would have been nice to kick that off on October 1st, but I don't think that's going to happen because I haven't even picked the games yet. I haven't even really looked at the games yet to understand, what it is that I want to play. Because, when you're talking about like indie games and retro games, there are hundreds of options. I could play like the first Clock Tower on the Super Nintendo. I could play Nightmare Creatures. I've actually been really interested in playing Nightmare Creatures 2, for instance. Carrier on the Dreamcast. Resident Evil 2, but I'm gonna hold off on that for reasons because I'm thinking for my big budget, big name AAA horror game for Christmas, I got Resident Evil 2 for the PS4. So I'm leaning in that direction for the popular horror game. I'm just worried that maybe, I say I'm worried that it's not going to be scary enough, but I know that game is kind of pretty scary. They actually like really ramped up the horror in that. I played the demo, so I know what that's like. But it's mainly just figuring out indie games and retro games, especially indie games, because that industry, if you want to call it an industry, moves so fast. I kind of need to get in there and pick something, we'll say recent, right? Which means going on itch.io and looking at their horror genre page and sort of figuring out from there where to go. So stay tuned for that, hopefully sometime soon. We'll say sometime in the next week that should start. I'm kind of chomping at the bit a little bit to get on there and make that happen. Also on the docket is a review for Super Mario Sunshine. What ended up happening there is that I got a Tumblr ask from, oh gosh, I know his name, and I think he said he wanted to be called his username, which I think now is just Saturn, but he's been he's been on and off the Patreon, we're Twitter mutuals, things like that. He sent in a Tumblr asking if I would be interested in writing a new review of Super Mario Sunshine, because I think it came up on like my Tumblr blog where I mentioned I had thoughts about that game, and he was curious to find out what those thoughts were. I have written a Super Mario Sunshine review in the past, a very, very, very old review, probably from around 2005, 2006. So, it's over 15 years old almost at this point. So I decided, you know what? Yeah, I guess I'll, bang out a quickie re-review of that game. Because I did end up replaying and finishing a replay of Super Mario Sunshine. I think it was just last year, or maybe like late 2018 or somewhere around there. So the game is still pretty fresh in my mind from that. The Super Mario 3D All-Stars just came out, so, it's kind of fresh in the public consciousness. Even when I was answering his Tumblr ask, I was kind of typing out my thoughts on the game, and it was starting to get pretty long. So, that was another kind of like motivating factor. Like, I have a lot to say about this game. It's not going to take me that long to type up what I think, because, I've already written a review once, 14, 15 years ago, maybe even like 16 years ago. It was definitely in that era where it was like one of the first game reviews I ever wrote, or like one of the first game reviews I was ever proud of. Because if you don't know my history of being like a wannabe games media, game journalist, games writer sort of person, I think I started writing reviews somewhere around 2000, 2001. I started sort of taking it seriously around like 2003-ish. That was when, I had like a GameFAQs account and I was writing about Sonic CD and Sonic Adventure 2. You can still find those super old GameFAQs reviews if you want. And then I think it was right around 2004, 2005 when I wrote this Super Mario Sunshine review. That's kind of where it started sort of feeling a little more serious for me, where I was actually like writing in earnest. I think that's where I ended up getting the offer to write for the Gamers Quarter, which was, this sort of quarterly zine about games writing, sort of like a new games journalism sort of thing. That's where I ended up being published for my Dissecting a Hedgehog article, was in the Gamers Quarter in 2005. It was kind of like an offshoot of the Insert Credit forums, if anyone remembers that. Those are like still going, by the way. I just found out the other day that there are like still Insert Credit forums, and I was tempted to see if my old password still worked or anything. And then obviously, a few years later, after being published by the Gamers Quarter, I got hired for TSSZ, and sort of like the whole thing started there. One of the first reviews I entered in the TSSC News database was my Super Mario Sunshine review. Before the website opened, I think Tristan said if there were any like archive reviews, just to kind of like fill out the database so that there was something there when the site launched. And it was Super Mario Sunshine, it was Sonic Rush, it was Sonic Rush Adventure. It was like a couple more reviews after that. It was like 5 games. Previous reviews that I'd written earlier, 2004, 2005, 2006, around there. I think there was even like a Sonic 06 review, actually, that I'd entered into that. Yeah, that's what it was. It was Super Mario Sunshine, Sonic Rush Adventure, Sonic 06, and then there was one more game, I think, as the archive reviews that I entered into the database before TSSC News relaunched in 2008. Anyway, so, I was somewhat proud of that review, and that was sort of the start of what could be considered a very watered down career. It wasn't like I wasn't like a tremendous success or anything, but I think I'm a pretty good writer now. I could stand to go back and touch some of that stuff up. Because that's something I like to do, if you haven't really noticed yet. Is sort of, that's kind of the thing with everyone, right? This kind of feeling of wanting to go back and fix things that haven't aged well. So, we go back to the Sonic Amateur Games Expo, we had remasters for Sonic Robo Blast 2, or remasters for Sonic Robo Blast 1, I should say. We had remasters for Sonic Triple Trouble, Sonic 2 for the Master System, remasters for Braz Sonic, which was a really old fan game, probably 2004 era. That got a remaster this year. Sonic Blue Frenzy Adventure, or Sonic Frenzy Adventure, rather. Blue Frenzy is the developer, but his game is called Sonic Frenzy Adventure. That got a remaster at Sage this year. People are just going back and touching up their old stuff. That's just what people do. So the idea that I would go back and sort of touch up my Super Mario Sunshine review, I'll do it. And truthfully speaking, I'm almost done with it. Or at least almost done with what I'd say is the first draft. And then, of course, I have a Shenmue video in the works that could be kind of considered to be a do-over for one of the very first video reviews I ever made. I think it was literally the second video in the Better Late Than Never video game series, was a video review for Shenmue. And it's not a very good video review nowadays. But I was actually, sometime in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I was going through like all the scripts I have half written, half completed. Maybe I touched on this last month, but that Shenmue video, like now that I've had some distance from it for a while, to where, I've kind of like, when you're creating something, when you're being creative, you kind of get this sense where you're too close to the project and you can't really see it anymore. It kind of just becomes all these tiny little details and you can't see the bigger picture anymore. That's kind of the way it got with that Shenmue script. And I, for months and months now, almost a year, in fact, I've said that script needs more work because, it wasn't entirely where I wanted it to be back in like November 2019 when I stopped writing on it. Going back to it now here in September, it's actually like a pretty good script. I would actually consider sort of like doing that next after I'm done with Jurassic Park. The only problem now is that like Shenmue 3 is out, and that script is mainly about Shenmue 1 and 2. So that's like the real holdup at this point, is that I feel like I should probably play Shenmue 3 and then figure out a way to work that into the script. Even though the script is pretty clearly, finished, it's complete. It's a full thought about Shenmue 1 and 2. And it's not necessarily like that sort of thing with my original review, where it sort of goes through the games chronologically and is basically just me explaining the plot and the mechanics. This is much more like video essay territory about what Shenmue means and what its game mechanics are trying to accomplish, sort of on a high level, like within the historical sphere of what it means I just feel like I'm pulling words out of my butt. What the Shenmue video is kind of how it relates to the history of, certain genres of games in Japan, and how that relates to how people say, like, the Yakuza series is supposed to be Shenmue done right, right? And it's much more like an essay of the Shenmue series in general, not necessarily me speaking about specific games. So maybe I could get away with that, but maybe not. I do feel like I should at least put an hour or two into Shenmue 3 before I publish that video. And that video, like this Jurassic Park video is probably like a month out at this point for how long it takes me to work my way through everything and, get it all set up, get it all edited, recorded, things like that. Especially with having, 3 episodes of Dare to Scare on top of, finishing out my recording for Jurassic Park. So, if there was going to be a prospective Shenmue video, it wouldn't be until December or January at the earliest. So there's that, And I don't even own Shenmue 3, so, again, that's a whole other kettle of fish that we'd have to deal with before that could happen. So don't count on a Shenmue video anytime soon. These things take time, and with me, they take longer than they should. But you also probably come to me because you like how well I edit videos, how well I write videos. I put a lot of love and care and attention in my videos that you might not necessarily get with someone else. So, I probably don't have to apologize for taking a long time. Even though I do wish I was faster at this. I think that's like a universal thing, right? I think I want to be faster, you want me to be faster, but I'm going as fast as I can. And that's good enough. I was considering a definitive way to play video for Super Mario 64. Again, Super Mario 3D All-Stars just came out. There has been a lot of discussion about the homebrew PC port of Super Mario 64. So, those two subjects kind of, connect together, as it were, to form something that would be a good idea for my channel. It would probably be a very popular video, which is exactly why I'm not going to do it. Nintendo is a pretty litigious company, especially if I put up a video talking about how to make a homebrew illegal PC port of Super Mario 64, which also largely involves taking a pirated ROM file and decompiling it into raw source code and then recompiling it into this PC version. I would definitely get a content ID, maybe even like a takedown strike for my channel. So I'm not going to do that. There's not going to be that video. I was also thinking of another video about fan games. What is that sound? I don't know if the microphone is picking up that sound, but I don't know, there's like water running in the apartment, and I think like the pipes go under my bedroom floor. So let's look at Audacity. I mean, Audacity doesn't really do a good job showing this kind of stuff anyway. I'll just do like a noise reduction. You probably can't really hear it. I can hear it like through my headphones, but whatever. Anyway, what I was thinking of doing is another video on fan games, particularly because, around the Sonic Amateur Games Expo, there has been some community drama with certain fan games where some of them were accepting financial compensation for game development, which, needless to say, don't do that. Like, that's a bad idea. Do not accept money for intellectual property that you yourself do not own. That's just the long and the short of it. And I'm speaking as someone who started the Sonic Amateur Games Expo all the way back in September of 2000, right? So, this is a subject that I've thought about a lot. The entire reason I started Sage to begin with was because I kind of wanted to dispel the myth that fan games were sort of like these, illegal bootleg games that were sort of trying to destroy the intellectual property of a corporation, right? Because you think of a bootleg, and what do you think of? You think of bootleg ROM files for the NES, right? Or the Super Nintendo. Someone takes, Chippendale Rescue Rangers for the NES, and they put Mario characters into it. And then they sell that at like a flea market for $5 on a bootleg cartridge that isn't real, isn't official, and they're just trying to make a quick buck. They're trying to steal money from you, steal content from the intellectual property owner. Fan games, on the other hand, should be treated kind of as like tribute content, right? It's like fan art or fan fiction or something like that. That's what a fan game is. It's someone who has lots and lots of love for a property, and they're kind of expressing that love in the creative medium of their choosing. When you introduced financial compensation into something like this, it creates a whole host of problems that you generally want to avoid happening, right? So we're talking about like Sega, right? Sega has been pretty cool about fan games, particularly about Sonic fan games. They've been very like encouraging for the community to say, hey, great work, keep it up, we love what you're doing. And, from the fan gaming community was born projects like Sonic Mania. There really is sort of like a very clear precedent where fans love these games so much that they make their own games, and it creates a career path into the future where they can do that for real, right? It's sort of like the analogy I go back to a lot is like comic books, right? This 14-year-old kid in middle school or freshman in high school or whatever, he might be doodling Spider-Man in his notebook, but, 10 years out, that kid could be drawing for Marvel Comics for real. That could be his career. And that's just something that happens, That's not like illegal or weird, or it's not like bootleg artwork or anything like that. That's a career path. I like Spider-Man as a teenager, so I'm going to draw or write or produce Spider-Man as an adult, because that's something that's possible. I can graduate from being a fan to being the creator of that thing. And that wasn't necessarily the goal that I created Sage to do, but it is like a very amazing side effect that, me trying to fight for the rights to say, fan games aren't this illegal thing, has sort of led to this being sort of like a thing where people can graduate from making fan games to making real games. That's legitimately awesome. That's super cool. But when you take donations like this, you're sort of trying to skip the line, right? You're saying, I want to work with this intellectual property, but I don't want to put in the work to actually get noticed by the parent company and go through all the legal hoops to be officially hired by them. So I'm just going to take donations for this fan project and hope nobody notices and get my money and get out. If my project gets like a takedown request or whatever, well, that just affects me. I'm not going to be responsible for anything that happens outside of that. But it does sort of play into that old stigma that I was trying to fight against, right? Where, you're just sort of playing into the idea that fan games are illegal bootlegs. And when you do that, it becomes a lot harder for other people to get into the fan gaming community. It means that there's a much greater threat of legal retaliation from the people that own the intellectual property. You think about Nintendo, right? I was just talking earlier in this video about how litigious Nintendo can be. You think about games like AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake, right? That game was in development for 11 years. And then a month after it comes out, Nintendo issues a takedown request. And they don't just issue one takedown request. For AM2R, they went like the full 9 yards, or whatever you want to call it. They issued a takedown request to his web host, his blog host, his email host, and even, takedown requests to him as a person. They did everything in their power to get this guy to stop distributing AM2R in every way humanly possible under threat of lawsuit. And it has scared other people away from making fan games. And with good reason, right? Because if you're just going to start up a fan game project and then get a cease and desist or whatever, that's kind of it. That's kind of the end of it. And there are ways around that I think I've talked about before. I really think that, part of the reason why Sega has been so hands-off with Sonic fan games is that we actually had, for a period, this group of like really punk sort of game developers, or not even game developers, like hackers, essentially. This sub-community of hackers in the Sonic community that essentially just gave Sega the middle finger and told them to go away. And, now we have, Sonic Retro. You register for the Sonic Retro forums, and I don't know if it's still there, but there used to be a sticky thread where you could just download every Sonic game ever made, essentially, for free. And, Sega has partnered with Sonic Retro officially. There are Sega employees registered and posting at Sonic Retro. They know about this ROM site, and they don't care about it. But as soon as you bring money into that equation, everything changes. Everything changes. Because now you are threatening their revenue. You are stealing revenue from them. The $5 or whatever someone donates to Sonic Smackdown now, doesn't go to Sega. And that creates a problem. That creates a problem that is increasingly difficult for Sega to keep ignoring. And when you do that, even if you're just doing donations, you threaten the entire community. You could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. All it takes is one project, and all Sonic fan games could disappear. Because it could just be this big sweeping thing where, some business suit up at Sega says, we need to do something about this. And then, they order their lawyer sends out, 75 cease and desist notices in a day. And then the next day they send out 75 more and 75 more. And it just keeps going because now it is a company directive. And it's because of the actions of one Sonic fan game that was taking donations or running a Patreon or whatever. That's a big, big problem. And it's to the point where, thinking about this, even just where you host your files is a problem, right? It's that changing of hands, or the money is changing hands, right? Where someone is profiting off of an IP they do not own. So let's say you upload your Sonic fan game to Mediafire. Mediafire has advertisements on it. That means that Mediafire is making money off of the Sonic the Hedgehog intellectual property, even though Mediafire doesn't own Sonic. That is a problem. If you pay for Google Drive to host your Sonic fan games, Google is making money off of the Sonic the Hedgehog intellectual property. If you host your own server, the ISP is making money off of the Sonic the Hedgehog intellectual property when they don't own it. This is a very hard to unpack problem. And you're just making it harder if you're charging money for your fan games. Even if it's just optional donations, you are making this harder on everyone. And that's basically what I want the video to be about. I was actually trying to find the words to say, what the video should be. And I was actually starting to cool off on the idea and just working through it here on the podcast, trying to figure out what to say as I was saying it. That's basically what I wanted the video to be. So maybe that video will come out. I don't know. It would have to be after Jurassic Park. Would it be after Shenmue? I don't know. I don't know if I'm doing that Shenmue video after Jurassic Park. I haven't even started this fan game video. Everything I just said was completely off the top of my dome. So we'll see. Like I said, I was starting to cool off on it because it was kind of like this strike while the iron is hot sort of thing. And that iron is growing cold. But it's also something that needs to be said. So if you couldn't hear that, I just shrugged my shoulders. I bought a RetroTink 2X Pro, which if you don't know what that is, that's called, technically it's called a line doubler. There's also this thing called an OSSC. What is that actually? I used to know what that acronym meant, and I don't remember what it means anymore. OSSC, it's like an open source scan converter? Yeah, open source scan converter. That's what an OSSC is. And basically what these do is they make it so that you can display old game consoles accurately and cleanly and nicely on a modern television. So what the RetroTink 2X Pro does, it's called a line doubler because of the way old TVs render. They render line by line, right? This is why you have interlacing, because interlacing is sort of like this system of alternating lines to double the frame rate. It's very complicated. And basically what this does is that it just blows up the image to twice its original resolution. So that in the case of the RetroTink 2X Pro, it takes like a 240p image, which we'll say is like a Super Nintendo or Sega Saturn or whatever else, and it blows it up to be 480p, which isn't exactly high def, but it's high enough resolution that a modern TV will be able to accept the signal and display the game properly. So you may remember that, I kind of founded my YouTube channel on the idea of having this capture card that did standard def video. I could hook up, a PlayStation, a Saturn, a Super Nintendo, what have you, to this game cap USB that I got on eBay for like $12, and I could capture standard def video. That's GameCube, Wii, even up to Xbox 360. I was using that video capture dongle to record video. And what this does is that, now I don't need that old USB dongle anymore. I can just plug all these old retro consoles into my Elgato and they work, which is actually like really beneficial because that USB dongle, it's hard to find drivers for that thing nowadays. I think on the laptop I finally found working drivers. But it was the sort of thing where like I tried, 5 or 6 or 7 different drivers before I found the one that works, because it's kind of like a generic device. It's not really like, it has a brand name. It's like Sabrent or something, but it's part of like a very generic line. It's one of those sort of things where like, a Chinese company probably makes them or something, and it's just different companies slap their brand on the device and then they sell them, as that sort of brand thing. So what it means is that like there's like 20 or 30 different drivers for that thing for like minor tiny variations of the hardware across like, 3, 5, 10 different brands, and finding the right brand of drivers that works for your device in Windows 10 is sort of a nightmare. And it was the sort of thing where I think on that laptop, I eventually figured it out. But now if I want to hook that thing up for my desktop, I'd have to go through that whole song and dance again. Because it was the sort of thing where it was like long enough ago that I don't remember which specific variants of the drivers were the ones that worked. And it may even be the sort of thing where like me installing drivers over the top of other drivers is actually what made it work. And I don't know the weird voodoo ritual I did to get my USB capture dongle to work on that laptop. And I don't want to go through that song and dance here on my desktop. So, I bought this RetroTink 2X Pro for about, I think it was $100. They're actually pretty cheap, like $100 sounds like a lot, and it is kind of a lot. But compared to an OSSC, like a FrameMeister or something, a FrameMeister starts at like $600 and can cost as much as $1,000. They are extremely, extremely, extremely expensive. And kind of for no good reason, I'd say. I don't necessarily know if the hardware in those devices is worth being $1,000, if we're being like perfectly honest. But comparatively, a RetroTink 2X Pro is way cheaper. It's more than I paid for that USB capture dongle, but I feel like I got incredibly, incredibly lucky with that USB capture dongle. It was way better than the price suggested it would be. But the RetroTink, so far, so good. I've only really used the Sega Saturn with it, which was, in itself kind of its own hassle, because my Sega Saturn is very old. The cables, the video cables for that thing, were not in good shape. It looked like I posted a photo of this on Twitter, and it wasn't very clear to see, but it kind of looks like the cable had gotten twisted at some point and stored twisted. So you can actually see like these ridges in the cable where it looks like it has been permanently twisted. And I assume that was like degrading the video quality. Because the original captures that I was doing with that old video cable, they were really dark. It would lose signal a lot. You'd only get audio out of the left channel or whatever, or like the right channel, I don't know. And it was just really gross looking. So I spent like, $15 on a new video cable for my Sega Saturn. That's a lot better, but it has its own problems because the cable's like a little cheap. It's a retro-bit Sega Saturn S video cable. And like the S video portion of the cable is just kind of cheap. The video quality isn't very good, but it's better than the old cable. I'll link like an Amazon review I wrote for the retro bit cable in my show notes here for the podcast if you want to read it. Because that's a whole other topic, and I don't really feel like rambling about Sega Saturn S video cables right now. But the RetroTink 2X Pro, that's been a good investment so far. I want to get around to hooking up my PlayStation 2 to it to see what it looks like. Because it's mainly supposed to be a line doubler for 240p, right? For, really old consoles like the PS1, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, things like that. I want to see how it handles like a proper 480i console, because I hear it does pretty good pass-through for that kind of stuff. I've been in the mood to stream Klonoa 2 lately, or like Parappa the Rapper 1. So we'll see. Again, that's another thing that I could be doing here. In the future is, checking out my RetroTink 2X Pro. I also bought some other stuff with regard to the RetroTink 2X Pro. You may remember a video on my YouTube channel about a broken Super Nintendo. There is a single pin on the cartridge slot connector that is broken, and it causes all kinds of like very weird glitches in various different games like, Gradius 3, Stunt Race FX, Star Fox, things like that. It's a really weird video. It's a really interesting thing. With regards to this RetroTink 2X, I actually brought my Super Nintendo with me when I moved out here to Nevada. It's still broken, but I brought it with me. And what I ended up ordering as part of like this whole RetroTink thing is I ordered a replacement cartridge slot for my Super Nintendo. Because I kind of want to see if I can fix it. And it doesn't actually seem like it's that hard to replace. There's no soldering involved or anything like that. It just it's almost like, it's weird. The cartridge slot itself is almost like a cartridge, if you've ever seen what the inside of a Super Nintendo look like. It's kind of just these metal pins that sort of lock down into the motherboard. So in theory, all I have to do is unscrew the old cartridge connector and put in a new cartridge connector, and that Super Nintendo will go back to work just almost like new. So that's something that I want to try out. I ended up buying a replacement cartridge slot connector. It was like $7. It really wasn't very much at all. And that's something that I want to get on here soon. I will probably, like, the idea I was having is that I'll do a video about it. I'll record the whole process of fixing my Super Nintendo, and we'll see what happens. But I'll tell you right now, I don't know. I was going to say I'd only put out the video if it was successful, but I don't know if I do that or not. It's something we're going to have to wait and see about, I guess. But that's that. Look forward to possibly a video about repairing my Super Nintendo again sometime in the next month, 2 months, 3 months. I don't know. We'll find out. And then finally, I guess Sega's like sending me press releases now. If you've been reading bltn.net, you'll notice I posted an article about the announcement of the Amazon Luna, which is a streaming service. It's sort of like Amazon's version of Google Stadia. And I posted about that because actually I got a contact from Sega's press team. Like, hey, Sonic Mania Plus is going to be on Amazon Luna. Can you write about it for your website? I thought, well, what? And it didn't come through the TSSC News tip email like it used to. Whenever Sega would want us to post something, they would either, contact Tristan directly or they'd send it through the news tip email. They didn't do it that time. They sent it to me directly, which, tells me that maybe Tristan still has contacts with Sega and he forwarded them to me, which would be pretty cool, I guess. It would be nice if Sega started sending me review codes like they were doing on TSSC. Though, to be perfectly honest, the idea that they'd be sending me stuff like the Sega Ages games, I don't know if I'd be super down for that. Thankfully, like the Sega Ages releases are done for now on Switch, so I don't think I'd have to worry about that kind of stuff anymore. The last game, like Herzog's Y, just came out, which, I don't care about Herzog's Y. I don't know about you. But that was kind of like, sort of the MO of those Sega Ages releases, right? Like the last few have been these really sort of, oh, excuse me, I need to stop for a break here in a minute. But those last few Sega Ages games were like just really obscure games that I don't necessarily know if people enjoyed. Or like, that's rude. People enjoyed those games. There are people out there who loved games like, I don't even remember what the last few games were. Like G-Lock Air Battle? I suppose there are probably fans out there of G-Lock Air Battle. I wasn't one of them. But when they mentioned that there are not going to be any more Sega Ages releases on the Nintendo Switch, I think about all the weird, obscure sort of, niche games they were getting into towards the end there. That's like, yeah, of course people stopped buying them, dude. You should have done like Virtua Fighter 1 or Daytona USA or, I don't know, Golden Axe The Duel, like games people would actually be interested in instead of, G-Lock Air Battle, Tant R, these weird sort of obscure classics that most people don't know about. But it would be nice if they sent me like, a review code for, I don't know, the new Sonic game next year or something like that, right? I don't think they'll do that. I don't think BLTN.net is a big enough site for that. But I did, at the very least, post their press release about Sonic Mania Plus coming to the Amazon Luna. And then I used that article to also rant about, the state of streaming games, whatever that's worth. Oh, and one more thing before I forget. The channel's coming up on 25,000 subscribers. I think as of this recording, I'm up to, 24,120 or something? Actually, I know, this drags the pace of the podcast down. I'm going to check. I actually have a tab open here with my channel. I can just go right to the dashboard, and it will tell me the exact number, or close to 24,142 as of this recording. So we are coming up on 25,000 subscribers, which is, for me anyway, that's a pretty big milestone. That is 1/4 of the way to YouTube actually sending me like a physical celebratory item, like, a plaque that I can hang up in a room somewhere. And at the rate that like my subscribers have been going up, it's possible that I could hit 100,000 subscribers, sometime in the next, we'll say 4 or 5 years. Which, that sounds like a pretty long time. That is a pretty long time. I'm a slow, tiny little channel that has never really been concerned with like chasing the algorithm very much. So, it makes sense that it would be kind of this slow climb, but at the same time, we're going to hit 25K probably before the end of the year. And I kind of want to do something for the channel about that. And I don't know what. I thought, people like Lindsay Ellis have done videos where they do like extended Q&A sessions on video, live on camera. And that's not really going to work for me. I mean, maybe it will. I don't think a lot of the people on my YouTube channel know about my Tumblr blog, where, it's basically just a running Ask blog where people send messages in and I respond to them. But, if anyone out there has any idea what they'd like me to do for 25,000 subscribers, I'm all ears, because I don't know what to do. So, that's coming. That's something to look forward to, I suppose. But that's it. That's everything I've done in the last month. That's the plans for things that I'd like to do in the coming month. As always, there's no guarantee that I'm going to get around to everything that I talk about here. because sometimes it's just me spitballing ideas, and I feel bad for coming up with all these ideas that I spit here on this podcast, and then so many of them never come true. I feel like I should be doing so much more for you guys. Anyway, that's going to be the end of this segment. We're going to take a break. I'm going to go get a drink of water, clear out my throat, chill out, and then we'll be back to talk about video games and movies. Stay tuned. And we're back. I know I keep saying this probably for the last 2 or 3 podcasts, but hopefully this segment will go quick. I don't really have a lot to talk about. Mainly this last month, it's just been Sage and, Fortnite. And I've kind of talked about Fortnite a lot on this podcast before. I never know if anyone wants to, hear me talk about Fortnite. The most recent season began... Gosh, was it this month? It feels like it started last month. It's all these Marvel heroes. And it's okay. It's not bad. It feels kind of big budget, but it's still, buggy in the way Fortnite has kind of always been buggy this last, chapter 2, this last year. Yeah, actually, you think about it. It was almost 1 year ago that the whole big event happened where, Fortnite shut down for, 3 weeks or whatever? 3 days? Gosh, I don't even remember. But yeah, it's been fine, I guess. I've also been playing the campaign mode of Fortnite, Save the World. If you don't know what Fortnite Save the World is, maybe I've talked about it on this podcast before, but it's basically a tower defense game. There's all these objectives. It's structured kind of like a mobile game, where you have heroes and all these currency systems and all this experience points. There's 5 or 6 different experience systems. There's all this, leveling up, powering up, feeding items to other characters to make them stronger. It doesn't really have that, but it kind of has that concept. It's just this very mobile game structured tower defense game that is $20. I was actually talking about this with a patron just a few days ago, because she was getting interested in it, because I've been posting clips of it to my Twitter. Because one of the things that I like about Save the World is that the dialogue is actually really funny. They have Ashley Birch as one of the voices, the main voice, as Ray, this little kind of hovering robot girl. She's super cute. The dialogue is super funny.
The harbor's been secured. Let's head home.
Before you go to home base, I'm gonna need about 10 of your longest survivors.
Do you mean tallest?
Sure. Have them say their goodbyes and march them out to the clearing.
I don't think I want to do that.
It's for a worthwhile cause. I need to spell out Blakebeard's back, you better watch out.
And how exactly will the survivors help?
That's where I'll get their arms and legs and skulls.
First of all, that would take way more than 10 survivors.
I don't know, I think I can do it with 10.
And second, we're going home. I'm sorry you died, but that doesn't give you the right to become a monster.
That absolutely gives me the right to become a monster. How do you think monsters happen, you idiot?
Goodbye, Blakebeard.
Okay, I'll see you later.
But it's not a game that I would necessarily recommend anyone else to play, because like I just said, it's very complex, needlessly complex. I've probably been playing Fortnite Save the World for 9 to 10 months now, and only just recently have I felt kind of like I'm getting a handle on how to play it. Not that it's a super complex game, but the way the menus are structured, the way the leveling up systems are structured, Just a lot of little stuff is a little more complex than it needs to be. It's not like impenetrable or anything. But I had a friend that guided me through the game, and up until like very recently, like within the last month or two, when we do like a mission where we had to build something, well, which is, most missions, usually I let him take point and build everything for me. And only now recently have I felt comfortable enough where I've started taking the initiative and building stuff for myself. In fact, I just completed a really big, important build. One of the things you do in that game, like one of the mission types, is home base defense. And how that is different. So you have two different... See, even now, this is really hard to explain. So you have all these different mission types in Save the World, right? And most of them are tower defense, which is you have a point that you're controlling on the map. You have to build up around the point and protect it for a set length of time. So you have like a mission called Ride the Lightning, right? Which is you have this van that's kind of been upgraded with all this science fiction technology so that the van can fly. And you have to protect the van while it powers up. So that means, building a structure around the van, building traps around the van, equipping the van with defenders, which are NPCs that carry guns that you give them that you find in missions, and they can be leveled up. Another mission type is Retrieve the Data, where you find... Well, gosh, how does Retrieve the Data actually work? I think you have to find like a data site in the map, which, these are all... It's sort of almost like a roguelike. You get like a set map, like a city map or a forest map, a swamp map, things like that. But what's in them changes a little bit every time, so it's never the same map exactly twice, but it is similar. So you can kind of learn the map's layout. You can kind of learn where to go, what to do, what's where, but never exactly. It's always a little bit different every time you go in. But I think with Retrieve the Data, you find like a data site and you have to build up around the data site while information is decoded. And, you have to defend the data site for a certain length of time until all the files are decoded. There's another one that is called Fight the Storm, where you build like a shield system that protects the city or whatever. And again, you have to build up around the shield system while it powers up, and you have to defend it for a set length of time. Not all the mission types are like that. There are other mission types. There's like Rescue the Survivors, where you run around sort of an empty map. There isn't really anything in the map. It's just full of people, and you have to run up to the people. You click on them. They'll say like, thank you for saving me, and then they'll teleport back to your home base. And some survivors have like more complex mission objectives. One of them will like... There's a meme in the Fortnite community about this guy. His name is Ned, and you want to avoid Neds in the Rescue the Survivor missions, because when you find him, he will tell you the same line every single time. He never changes his dialogue. He never changes what he wants, but he'll say,
I was getting worried. I know it's a lot to ask. I really can't leave without it. It's somewhere nearby.
Check your map for the location of the medkit.
But what he wants is a health kit. So you have to venture out into the map, find his health kit, bring it back to him, and then he'll count as being rescued. There's a variant of Ned where you'll run across a porta potty just out like in the middle of the forest. And you'll hear Ned's lines where he'll be like, it's really important. I can't leave without it. It would be a great help if you found it for me. And you have to go find toilet paper. And once you find the toilet paper and return it to the porta potty, then that survivor counts as saved. And there's like other things, there's survivors usually build like shelters, which is, it's like a survivor shelter. It's just usually like a piece of scrap metal propped up like a campsite or something. And sometimes you'll find empty survivor shelters and you have to go find the survivor that is part of that shelter. Sometimes you'll have to rescue survivors that are being attacked by the enemies in the game, which are called husks, which are sort of like zombies, but not really like zombies. Other mission types are things like Refuel Home Base, where you have to go find this resource type called Blue Glow. There is Deliver the Bomb missions, which is sort of like pushing the cart in Team Fortress 2, but you actually build like the pathway that the bomb takes. And then there's like limited time events, again, sort of like a mobile game where you'll get like this banner with this sort of like sub-story that's disconnected from the main plot. And then there's stuff like Hit the Road, which is like a road trip minigame where you sort of have to stick close to a target vehicle while it drives down this road. And you have to protect it. Again, sort of like the cart delivery missions in Team Fortress 2. There's going on right now is something called Hexylvania, which is their Halloween limited time event, where you're going around to like spooky old castles, and there's this plot line about this ghost that you have to help named Willow, and you know, she's trying to protect you from this hellmouth under this hotel, and you have to like, there's a vampire you're gonna fight named Vlad, and you have to destroy all his statues and try and help the people of Hexylvania. And
Whoa! Or rather, whoa. Hey, Commander? The guidebook has a brand new chapter. Chapter 13. The Resurrection of Vlad. Let's stay the course. I mean, sure, there's a new chapter of the guidebook about Vlad's return to Hexylvania and his subsequent 1,000-year reign. Rivers of blood. Lakes of blood. Intercoastal waterways of blood. And sure, it appears to be written in blood, which is scary. And Comic Sans, which frankly seems unprofessional. But that doesn't mean that Vlad is for real coming back. Huh. A new footnote. Yes, it does, Ray. That's exactly what it means. Oh. Keep taking out those statues. I'll read up on this so-called Vlad resurrection. All right, dude, enough with the edits. I get it. You're haunted.
So it's not just tower defense, but it is like 80% tower defense, with a bunch of like side stuff around it. Again, very funny writing, very funny story. Well, that's the other thing about Fortnite Save the World. It gets funny over time. One of the things that I learned about Fortnite Save the World is that originally it was a completely different game. I guess when the Battle Royale portion of Fortnite blew up super big, Epic started pouring money into the Save the World portion of Fortnite, and what they ended up doing is they redid the entire progression system of that game. I mean, when they did that, they also threw out like some of the original voice cast and everything. The original version of Fortnite starred Michelle Rodriguez as this character named, I think she's just called Rodriguez. She was originally like, you know, a military commander. And obviously, you know, celebrity talent like that is very expensive. So when they redid all the progression, they threw out all these game mechanics. They threw out the original voice cast. They threw out the original characters. And that's when they brought in, you know, Ashley Birch and all these other completely different voice actors, completely different cast. So when you start playing Fortnite Save the World, that very first tutorial mission features Michelle Rodriguez as the Fortnite character Rodriguez, as she interacts with this completely different cast of characters. And then the moment the tutorial is over, you switch over to this different cast of characters. You know, Ashley Birch and all the other people. Can't remember their names right now off the top of my head. I know some of them, like, you know, I looked up like the voice actor for Dennis at one point. Dennis is this sort of loser kind of burger flipping teenager character that everyone makes fun of. He's like one of the best characters in the game. He's really funny. They also hired one of the new voice actors for the current version of Save the World is the guy who played Professor Utonium. He plays a robot called Locke, and he's very childlike and very, very kind of dopey and funny, very naive, let's say.
Look, I probably don't need to tell you that the hero community is not happy about those flyers.
Well, maybe if they spend more time getting bitten by radioactive bugs and surviving lab accidents, and less time leaving me swears on my voicemail.
Swears? Or what are you, 5 years old?
I'm 7.
7? Like, should be coloring and sipping juice 7? Like, for real?
Yeah.
And that's not robot years or something?
No.
Why are you in charge?
Ray said it would just be for 5 minutes and she'd be right back. And then I had to spend the night alone. By myself.
All right, little man. We got you.
But all that aside, like what that meant is like when they completely went in and redid the progression for Save the World, I think that's when it got super complex. Because they kind of had to figure out how to take all the mechanics they had originally and figure out where to put them after the fact. So, you have like, okay, so you have an account level. That is, what level your account is. You have a mission level, which is how powerful your overall, like an average of all your power levels combined. You have a hero level, which is the current hero you have equipped, and then it determines, their hit points, their defense, their shield energy, like things like maybe like DPS values, how fast they run, what abilities they have equipped, like perks and stuff. You have weapon levels, which determines how strong your guns are. The higher level a gun is, the more perks it has unlocked, which is things like, buffs for headshots, elemental damage, whether or not it does more damage to enemies that are like ensnared in tar or ice panels. You have trap levels, which is sort of like weapon levels, but applies to traps, and it determines how powerful that trap is. If you don't know, again, this is sort of a tower defense game, so you're laying down these tiles. It's like wood, stone, metal, and tiles themselves also have levels. You spend materials to level up tiles. Stronger tiles are harder for enemies to break. You have, there's defender experience points. Defenders are NPCs that you can give guns that will patrol during missions. So you can put like a defender outpost on a structure you build in a tower defense map, and that defender NPC will have their own level. You can give them guns, which again, guns have their own level. There is Survivor EXP, which is something completely different from Defender EXP. A Survivor is an NPC that lives in your home base. And what that means is that you can equip different teams of survivors that give you buffs to your statistics. Like if you do a scouting party team and you look at all the perks of the different survivors, you can equip them to a scouting party that will give you buffs to your shields or your attack or your panel health, building health, trap efficiency, all these little perks. And then there's also, I think that might be all the different types of leveling up. And then all this other stuff, you can also level it up so much that you can evolve it. There's like massively multiplayer online RPG rarity levels for everything. So, gray, green, blue, purple, gold. You can level up the rarity of different heroes or different weapons or different traps. There's a crafting system in this game. Sometimes you find weapons in maps, but other times, mostly actually, you build weapons from schematics. And schematics are things that you win for doing quests. Schematics, actually, scratch that. When I said you could level up weapons, you don't level up weapons. You level up schematics. This is actually an important distinction because there are times where I have crafted a certain weapon, it has been put into my inventory, and then I upgrade the schematic after the fact, and all the weapons in my inventory are then the old version of the schematic before I leveled the schematic up. And then, that's not even touching on enemy types. That's not even touching on currency types. There's gold, there's blue glow, there's tickets. Sometimes it's candy, not tickets. There's venture EXP. There's copper is a currency type in some modes, but not other modes. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's very overwhelmingly complex, which is why I would never suggest anyone play it, which is why some people are saying Fortnite Save the World is in danger of being shut down in a couple years, because Epic just brought Save the World out of early access for the first time ever. It's been in development. It's been in early access for 3 years, but it's been in development for probably closer to 5 or 6 years, and it definitely does not feel like a game that has been in development for 6 years. And bringing it out of early access did another thing. Epic said Save the World would be free to play. That's kind of why it's structured like this big, hyper complex mobile game, is because they said when it hits 1.0, it's going to be free to play. When it hit 1.0, Epic said, actually, no, Save the World isn't going to be free to play. It's going to be $20 forever. And what they're doing with that now is they're sort of, I said before that they had like these mobile game banners, these limited time modes, these holiday events, that sort of thing. They're apparently trying to pour more financial resources into these holiday events through what is called ventures. And what ventures have turned out to be is sort of garbage. Because it's basically just a zone where all your progress gets reset and you have like specific new rules to deal with. So when they were doing the road trip venture, which was actually the Blasted Badlands venture, if you want to be like completely honest, what that meant is that, you couldn't use your energy abilities. Because energy would be sapped over time. So you were constantly basically at 0 energy the entire time. So any like perk or ability or whatever that was equipped on your hero that required this energy meter, it didn't work until you killed like 3 or 4 enemies to build up this energy. And then even then that energy would only stick around for like a few seconds before the energy sapping thing of this venture zone would, drain it back down to 0. And I assume nobody's listening to the podcast anymore at this point, because anytime I ever talk to Fortnite with my friends, they all immediately tune out. But you can see kind of why they do that, because this is extremely complicated. It is nuts. It is crazy. And the only reason I am in on Fortnite Save the World is because I had a guide to show me the ropes over the last, 9 months, 10 months, whatever. But the dialogue is funny, and I hope that when the game eventually shuts down in like another year or 2 or 3, I hope that there is like an archive of all these funny conversations. Because at this point, there's probably, 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe even like 100 hours of what is basically just a radio play. Because that's the thing about Fortnite Save the World, right? There are no cutscenes. There's not even like a visual novel, right? It's like a radio play that plays out over unrelated gameplay. A lot of the missions in Fortnite Save the World, especially the event missions, are about clicking on an item to hear the next snippet of funny dialogue. That's a lot of what happens in these missions. And it's good, funny dialogue. What can I say? Like, it's actually worth listening to. It's very, very funny. I don't know if Ashley Birch is necessarily responsible for writing the dialogue, but it wouldn't surprise me if she was, because she does have kind of those roots, right? With, hey, Ash, what you playing? Things like that. She does come from what would be considered by some to be a funny family. Whether or not you agree with the type of humor that Anthony Birch injected into, let's say, Borderlands 2, which some would call the least funny game on planet Earth. But, so it goes. But to circle back around to what I think I originally started talking about, I finally got confident enough that there is a mission type called Home Base Defense. With most of the other mission types in Fortnite, like Ride the Lightning, Retrieve the Data, Fight the Storm, things like that, the structures you build for the tower defense segments in that only last as long as the mission does. The moment the mission is over, everything you built is effectively erased. It's gone. It never comes back. The next time you load into that specific map, it's not there anymore. Even if all the other buildings are there in that specific environment zone, like if you load into a city, all the city buildings will still be there, but the structures you built are gone after that mission ends. With the home base defense missions, what happens is that everything you build is permanent. So this is the most where it's like a real tower defense mode. You have this shield generator in the middle of the map, and you have to build up around it so that the zombies, the husks, don't like tear down your building and destroy the shield generator. So finally, after 9 or 10 months of playing this game, I finally got comfortable enough with its mechanics that I built my own home-based defense map. We finally moved on to what is probably the final area of Save the World, which is called Canny Valley. It's this desert location, which meant starting over from scratch. You have a home-based defense mission in Stonewood, which is where the game starts. You have a home-based defense mission in Plankerton, which is the second environment type. It's sort of like this autumny sort of forest area. And then you have Canny Valley. And since we just started Canny Valley, this was an opportunity for me to build what I want. So I took the initiative and I built what I want, which is this sort of, it's like a castle kind of looking thing. I am calling it the Burger King Kids Club because way back in Stonewood, when we first started playing the game, like part of the home-based defense mission type is that you have the shield generator in the middle of the map. And then every time you do a home-based defense mission, they want you to build an amplifier so that your space in this home-based defense mission map expands, you get more space to build in, but you also have sort of a new structure to build around and defend. And way back in Stonewood, one of the amplifiers I had to build up around, I tried to build for myself. And I used the stone tile type, which is kind of this red brick. And when my friend saw the red brick, he said that the amplifier I built up around looked like a Pizza Hut. So every time we refer to going back to Stonewood to do a home-based defense map, a home-based defense mission, we refer to it as going back to Pizza Hut. So this new one in Canny Valley, this castle I built, you see where I'm going with this? Burger King Castle, Burger King Kids Club? Nah? Yeah, okay. That is probably the longest explanation for the worst, weakest joke you will ever get on any podcast. So that's Fortnite. How long did that take me? Oh my gosh. 26 minutes. Oh boy. Nobody is gonna listen to that. Also been playing, I think I said, I talked about it last month. Forza Horizon 3. I actually beat the game just a few hours ago. Feels a lot shorter than Forza Horizon 4. Forza Horizon 4 is the sort of game that feels like it's going to go on for infinity. Every time I finish an event in Forza Horizon 4, it just gives me like 5 or 10 more. And it just keeps doing that over and over and over and over again. Forza Horizon 3 feels really oddly structured. The progression in that game was really confusing. Because it kind of hides all your events, your event unlocks, behind these milestones. And I think this is something that it inherited from Forza Horizon 1, right? Where you're sort of building up the festival, you're making it, more popular by kind of being, this really good racer that is drawing fans in from outside to come watch the event. So, a lot of the new event types that unlock are sort of based around these thresholds of how many fans you personally have. So, you'll reach a threshold where your fan level will upgrade to the next level, and then you expand the event venue, and then around the venue, all these new race types will get unlocked, which is fine by itself if you're coming at this chronologically from Horizon 1 to Horizon 2 to Horizon 3, but going backwards from Horizon 4, which I played on Game Pass and now don't have access to anymore, backwards to Horizon 3, it feels kind of like a nightmare. It's this sort of thing where for over half the game, it felt like I didn't have anything to do because effectively it was waiting for me to do all my available events so that it would tick up to the next level of, venue progress or whatever, accrue enough fans to expand to the next venue. And that kind of sucked. Like it really felt like I had nothing to do a lot of the time. That, the map was just empty, full of things that either I already finished or I didn't want to do. And it got even worse because there's one of the things I started doing to help alleviate this feeling of not knowing what to do is that if you push, I think it's left on the D-pad, you'll call up your GPS and you can actually request that your GPS set a route to your nearest, whatever. So you can just hit left and you can say, what should I do next? And the game will actually suggest what you should do next. And what ended up happening is something that's really, really annoying. New to Forza Horizon 3 are these things called bucket list challenges, which is basically where you have to race a specific car during a specific song to a specific event type. So it'll be like, do a time trial from here to here without taking damage. Or it'll be, get a stunt score in this zone. It'll be, really, that's the only two I know of, because that's what most of them are. It'll just be, a normal time trial. It'll be, there's 4 or 5 different things it can be. And there are 30 bucket list challenges in the game. And that's all well and good for the most part, except that after a certain point, every time I would ask my GPS, what should I do next? All it would tell me was to do the next bucket list challenge. That's all it would ever do. It was to the point where near the end of the game, I had maybe 3 bucket list challenges left, and I'd ask the GPS. I knew what it was going to say, but I'd ask it anyway. I'd say, what should I do next? And the GPS, which is named Anna, would come up and she'd be like, Ryan, there is a bucket list challenge nearby. Should I set a route to it? And you'd say yes. And it would set it on literally the opposite side of the map, 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 miles away. And that's all she would feed me, was these bucket list challenges. I knew I had other event types I could do. I had racing championships, I had all this other kind of stuff. But every time I'd ask her, what should I do next? All she'd want to tell me is bucket list, bucket list. You have a bucket list challenge nearby. It's 7.5 miles away. That counts as nearby. And I started to get real sick of it. I stopped after a certain point, asking her what I should do. Because you can also, in addition to just having this quick option of what should I do next, if you go to the next GPS menu option down, you can say, show me a race event. Show me a PR stunt, which is how you build up fans. PR stunts are danger zone ramps, which is where you ramp off and you have to do a jump that's 700, 800 feet long. They're drift zones, there's speed trap cameras. Those are PR stunts. It's basically things that show your fans how cool you are, and it's a quick and easy way to build up fan numbers so that you can expand the venue. So you can tell her these specific things show me a race, show me a championship, show me a PR stunt, things like that. And I started doing that because she just would not stop recommending these stupid bucket list challenges. And bucket list challenges are fine, when you do them once every 5 missions or whatever. But when it's the only thing she ever recommends, it's a bummer. But yeah, Forza Horizon 3 is an okay game. I haven't really ever played too much of Forza Horizon 2, but I've always gone out of my way to say that I think Horizon 3 is better than 2. I don't know if it's better than the first Horizon game on the original 360, but that game holds a special place in my heart anyway, because the venue in Horizon 1 is Colorado, so it feels kind of like a slice of home for me. Especially now. I mean, even when I lived in Colorado, the fact that Horizon 1 was set in Colorado was the coolest thing to me. And now that I'm not in Colorado anymore, it's kind of I've got this emotional attachment to that game. But right now, if you're looking for a good racing game that is as serious as you want it to be, but can still be pretty arcadey, I would say I would say Horizon 4 is the best one, but at this point, Horizon 4 is also the only Forza Horizon game still being sold. Because Horizon 3 is off the market right now, Horizon 2 is off the market, Horizon 1 is off the market. If you get lucky, you can probably find disc copies on eBay, but that would require that you actually own an Xbox console for that to work. In fact, let's check right now. eBay, Forza Horizon. How much is Forza Horizon going for on the Electronic Bay? It's not telling me. Well, that's just selling a Forza Horizon account with 999 billion credits. I want the game. I don't want some weirdo's account. Yeah, all these are just accounts. That is creepy. Okay, Forza Horizon 3, Xbox One is $10. Forza Horizon 1 for the Xbox 360 is $10. Forza Horizon 2 for the Xbox 360 is $12. So, it's not like necessarily a collector's item or anything. You can still go out there and find it if you really want it. But, I would also suggest you get Forza Horizon 4 instead, because it's just a much more robust game. I think that's just about it for video games I've been playing, really. You'd think, normally, I've been wanting to get back to, Halo 3, I think I started, 2 months ago, and I haven't touched ever since. There's recently been a big Left 4 Dead update that, overhauls a lot of bugs that were in the game and implements a new campaign. It's all kind of like a fan-made sort of campaign. I could, maybe necessarily talk about a Sage game. I thought about talking about Sonic GT, which was, if we're talking about a game that's the closest to the vision I pitched in my Fixing Sonic video, Sonic GT probably comes the closest to the ideas I had in that video, but it's still not quite there. But at the same time, I've said this before, the ideas I put forth in that video were kind of just ideas. They weren't necessarily a game design document. Because the thing with ideas is that, you start to implement them, and then maybe you find out they don't work out quite as you envisioned, and maybe you have to change them a little bit. So, I was never necessarily committed to the ideas I had in that video. And, Sonic GT, for what it's worth, the newest, well, it's not even a demo. I was going to say the newest Sonic GT demo, but it's not. It's, Sonic GT is done. It's out. It's finished. It's about 4 or 5 levels long, which is, that's not like a full-sized video game, but for a fan game, that's not bad. That's nothing to sneeze at. But to get back to what I was trying to say, as far as what I envisioned when I was talking about a new type of Sonic game in that video, I think Sonic GT hits the closest to home there. So, if you wanted one Sage game for me to recommend for you to play, it would be Sonic GT at this point. I've also... Super Mario 35 just came out. I was actually going to try and play that during the break to, have something to talk about here. I didn't. Sorry about that. I think that's about it as far as video games that I wanted to talk about. Spelunky 2 just came out just a couple days ago on PC. It's been out on PS4 for a couple weeks now. I don't know if I'm going to buy Spelunky 2. I mean, I love Spelunky 1 to death, but you don't save money by spending money. And Spelunky 2 is $20. So, I don't know. I'm waffling over whether or not I want to buy it. I have so many other video games I could be playing. I never even finished Spelunky 1. I could just go back to Spelunky 1 and try and finish that game. And then if I finish Spelunky 1, if I finally beat Olmec, then maybe it's time for Spelunky 2. But I don't know. I'd love to buy it, but I'd also love to save money. What else has come out recently? Everyone's talking about Hades. I'm not going to be buying Hades. I'm sure that's a good game too. In fact, a lot more of my friends seem to be talking about how cool Hades is instead of talking about how much they think Spelunky 2 is a cool video game. That's about it. Crash Bandicoot 4 comes out in a couple days. I'm probably not getting that either. Again, can't save money by spending money. And I'd rather be saving money at this point for a new computer, a new game console, whatever. Stuff is getting more expensive, and it's whew. In lighter news, I saw Bill and Ted Face the Music. That is the third Bill and Ted movie. If you didn't know, I genuinely love the first two Bill and Ted movies. It was one of those things where I didn't realize how much I loved them until I rewatched Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey like 2 or 3 years ago. And there's some language in Bogus Journey, there's some language in the first Bill and Ted that isn't kosher anymore. They use certain slurs that are like really genuinely terrible. But also that's one of those things where it's like, it's a product of its era. If they were making those movies today, it wouldn't have that language in it. And true enough, Bill and Ted Face the Music doesn't have that language in it. It's one of those movies where you get really worried about it because, making a sequel this long after the original film is usually a recipe for disaster. But in the case of Bill and Ted Face the Music, that's one of those things where like the director of Bonus Journey, the director of Bogus Journey, also with like Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter, all three of these guys have wanted to do a third Bill and Ted movie basically since Bogus Journey came out. They've kind of been sitting on this idea for like so long, like over a decade, maybe 2 decades even. And this is kind of like their Hail Mary, finally get to make the movie they wanted to make sort of thing. And what this means is that, Bill and Ted Face the Music kind of doesn't miss a beat. It picks up right where you'd want it to pick up. And it's just a very funny, very fun, very lighthearted. It just feels like exactly the kind of movie I needed right now. And it's not necessarily like the greatest movie ever made or anything like that. Like budget-wise, it feels like super cheap. Like a little bit, we'll say like direct to video, right? Or like direct to streaming now. It kind of feels like the sort of thing you'd see in like a Netflix TV series. That's the sort of production value we're working with here. So, it doesn't look terrible, but it looks a little chintzy, which, that first Bill and Ted movie was pretty budget. The second Bill and Ted movie was also, sort of pretty budget. These have not been like outrageously, massively successful movies. They've had like, weird development histories where it's kind of a miracle that any of this even happened at all. The original concept for Bill and Ted was like, it was like this comedy routine that the original 2 directors of that first Bill and Ted movie used to do at like bars, right? They used to do this Bill and Ted routine as like a comedy show in just like dive bars. And it may have even started as this thing that they were just doing for friends. And it sort of like evolved from there to become this movie about, 2 charmingly stupid teenagers traveling through time for a history report and then, getting killed and going to hell. And it just kind of escalated into this really absurd, crazy thing. And it like at every step of the way, like studios did not believe that it would be successful. It never made like tons of money, but it was never a bomb either. It was the sort of thing where like, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, right? That movie was released by a different studio than the first Bill and Ted movie because the original studio had no faith that the Bill and Ted sequel as pitched, they didn't believe that was going to be anything that was successful or good or anything like that. So, they essentially had to find a different studio to make the sequel. And then, this third movie took 20 years before it got made. It is an absurd legacy. And it's not the greatest movie. We all joke about Keanu Reeves being this immortal vampire. He's starting to actually look kind of old. Alex Winter kind of looks old. It's a little bit of a cheap movie. It's a little bit predictable. It doesn't quite have the bombast of the finale that I kind of want it to have. But at the same time, it is sort of the perfect finale to this trilogy of movies. It is everything I wanted a third Bill and Ted movie to be. Case closed. I don't have to say anything more than that. It got me to laugh so much because there are so many good jokes in that movie. Like, I'm going to spoil one here. It's early on, right? And if you haven't seen Bill and Ted 1 or Bill and Ted 2, this is also going to be kind of a spoiler for those movies too. So, skip ahead 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, whatever. But the whole thing about Bill and Ted, the entire movie series, is that they will write a song to unite the world that will bring about world peace. They will be, in the future, they will be revered as like these heroes that saved the planet. And that's what leads people from the future to come back in time to contact Bill and Ted throughout this entire series of films to say, hey, you're going to screw up something really bad in about 24 hours. We're from the future. We're going to help you so that you can write the song to save the world. And Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey ends in this tremendous rock concert where Bill and Ted finally play this amazing piece of music called God Gave You Rock and Roll 2. And it actually, like, outside of the context of the movie's lore, this movie was written by Kiss. And it's a really good, I think it's a really good song. It's really cheesy. It's kind of a power ballad, but in the context of who Bill and Ted are, it fits. It's kind of heartwarming, and the movie ends on that. The movie ends on like this montage as the song plays out, as Bill and Ted give their, concert to end all concerts. It's this montage of like newspaper clippings about how Bill and Ted become super famous, their song, world leaders hear their song, and all of a sudden, wars, there's no more wars. It's all over. Everyone's happy. God gave rock and roll to us. Bill and Ted 3 opens with saying, hey, Bill and Ted actually didn't change the world. In fact, their band broke up. They're kind of, living out of their garage. They're struggling with the idea of writing a song to unite the world, because that's still, apparently, even though Bill and Ted 2 ends on that song, it hasn't actually happened yet. And their whole spiel is that they're trying to find the song. They've spent their lives, they've dedicated their existence to writing the song that will unite the world and save everyone. And they haven't done that. And I'm laughing just thinking about it, but they're playing a wedding. Like, here's our new song. It's going to save the world. And it's this like super high concept, basically unlistenable performance art of like Mongolian throat singing. And like, I think Bill has like a cowbell or something he's hitting. And it's this cacophony of garbage. With
that beautiful thought in mind, for your first dance, we wish to present you with a matrimonial offering. A sneak peek at the world premiere of our newest sonic creation.
We're not sure if this is going to be the song that unites the world.
We're pretty sure it might.
At least we hope.
Yeah.
Please enjoy the first 3 movements of That Which Binds Us Through Time, the chemical, physical, and biological nature of love, an exploration of the meaning of meaning, part 1.
Ready, Bill?
Ready, Ted. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Like I said, it's high concept. They are struggling to make the song that will unite the world because they think it's going to be this tremendous thing that will, be beyond even them. And it's just seeing them like they're starting to get old, starting to get wrinkles on their faces, starting to get a little bit of the pudge because they're getting old. in these ill-fitting suits, and they still talk like they're teenagers. It's like, whoa, dude, it's that kind of voice coming out of like these 45, 50-year-old men as they sing this horrible music, and everyone at the wedding just kind of shoots them this look like, what are you doing? And nobody believes in them. Nobody thinks that they're whole, because they've told everyone at this point, we're going to write the song that will unite humanity. And everyone at the wedding knows this, and nobody at the wedding believes that they actually died and went to hell. Nobody believes that they're actually going to write the song to unite the world. And it's just, it's so good. And like Kristen Schaal is like, she plays the new Rufus. She plays Rufus's daughter. And she is like just the perfect cast for that character. It's there's so many other good moments in this movie that are just, Bill and Ted Face the Music, good movie, A+. It may not be perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect. None of the Bill and Ted movies have to be perfect. They just have to be fun, and this is a fun movie. I kind of want to watch it again now, just talking about it. The only other movie that I've watched this month, it's getting to be close to Halloween. So I was talking to my cousin who runs a Plex server full of, movies he's ripped out of his collection, movies I've ripped out of my collection that I've given to him to put on his Plex server. I have access to that Plex server, so, it's kind of like this private thing that only, 2 or 3 or 4 people have access to. And he was asking me for suggestions on like Halloween specials. And you know me, I run the graveyard shift, or I used to run the graveyard shift. Now it's just like a playlist on Spotify, or 8 tracks if you want to get crazy. But at one point, at the height of the graveyard shift, it was also like a video streaming service where I was collecting like all these movies and Halloween specials and commercials and everything else. So I kind of know this stuff. I actually still have like a DVD-R that I should see if it still can even be read in my computer that is full of old Halloween specials. And he asks me, do you have any recommendations for Halloween specials? And I kind of just named some stuff off the top of my head. The Pumpkin That Wouldn't Smile, The Last Halloween, Dracula Saves Halloween, The Worst Witch, Halloween is Grinch Night, The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, obviously. And then, slightly more esoteric stuff, like made-for-TV movies, like The Midnight Hour, Dark Night of the Scarecrow. And then I remember something called Cry Baby Lane, which ended up with me tracking down a copy of Cry Baby Lane, because I'd never actually seen it. I knew the name, but I didn't know the story behind it. I didn't know anything about it. So this actually ended up being sort of like a deep dive for me. I not only watched Cry Baby Lane, but I learned about the history behind the special. Cry Baby Lane was something that only ever aired one time on Nickelodeon on October 30th in 2000. Once ever in the entire history of the channel. And that's because after it aired, they were flooded with complaints from parents that the special was too scary. Which, obviously, this is before the days of social media where, people complaining about your thing are largely to be ignored because, it's so easy to contact everyone that, maybe you're being dogpiled and it's just, it's a small infraction, but, still even like small infractions, if you're popular enough, it can result in hundreds, thousands of complaints. But, year 2000, early days of the internet, nobody really has that kind of power to really, put it in perspective about what's a big problem and what's a small problem. So they got enough volume of complaints that they essentially threw this movie into the vault and forgot about it. They never aired it again. Cry Baby Lane aired one time, October 30th, 2000, and it disappears. Seemingly forever. And it became sort of this lost piece of, this famous piece of lost media. Cry Baby Lane. I remember seeing that, it was so scary. It was this incredible sort of like thing, because I was like 12 years old. And when you're 12 years old, it sort of takes on like this mythical status because nobody's seen it in, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, that it sort of builds up this reputation as, oh, what was Crybaby Lane? Oh, ooh, I don't even want to think about it, And apparently, like, it even turned into this urban legend, or I guess, in modern terms, it turned into a creepypasta. I was actually going to look up what the creepypasta was before I started this podcast, and I just realized just now, recording this, that I forgot to do that. As far as I remember of what I heard about the creepypasta, it was purported to be like a brainwashing program by the director of the movie, and that, the creepypasta apparently alleged that he was sent to jail, and that's the whole reason why the special was never shown again, is because, it was part of like this brainwashing program. In actuality, that's not true. That's not true at all. The director never went to jail. It's not a brainwashing program. It was just forgotten about. It was locked away in a vault. They said, oh, we can't air this. It's too scary. And then it built up this cult status, this urban legend came up around it. And then I guess like 2011, 2010, somewhere around there, somebody on Reddit finally found a recording of Crybaby Lane. And they ripped it to their computer. They uploaded it for the internet. And, it spread like wildfire. Oh my gosh. Oh, we finally have Crybaby Lane, the legendary lost Nickelodeon movie that was too scary. Here it is. And it kind of forced Nickelodeon's hand at that point, where they had to say, oh, we know what Crybaby Lane is. We locked it in a vault. If people want to see it, then we'll just show it. And, Halloween 2011, I think they re-aired it. They re-aired it again in 2017. So, it's kind of become this thing that, I guess they were too ashamed to admit at first. And now it's become this thing where like, yeah, we have Crybaby Lane. It's fine. And having watched the movie for myself now, I can definitely confirm that, yeah, actually it has, more than a few scenes in it that are probably a little too intense for 12-year-olds. Even now, watching it for the first time ever, as a 37-year-old adult male who has seen, his fair share of horror movies and things like that over the years, there are parts of Crybaby Lane that kind of creep me out a little bit. Heads up, top of this discussion, I'm going to be spoiling a considerable amount of the movie Crybaby Lane. I still don't think it's available for purchase anywhere. I don't think it's on any streaming services. You cannot pay money to watch this movie. You either look it up on YouTube, and the whole movie is on YouTube right now. Somebody recorded it off of TV in 2011 and then posted it to YouTube. Or you wait until the next time Nickelodeon airs this movie, which could be 5 years from now. You just don't know. So you can look it up on YouTube if you really want to. Or you can listen to me spoil this movie over the next, we'll say, 10 minutes. So the story of Crybaby Lane is that two boys, Andrew and Carl, Andrew is the younger brother, Carl is the older brother, are friends with a mortician. And this mortician likes to tell these two boys ghost stories. And he tells them the story of Crybaby Lane. And it's about this farmer who had twin boys. They were conjoined twins, joined, I guess they don't necessarily say where they were joined, if it was at the hip, if it was at the shoulders, or whatever, just that they were conjoined twins. I believe the movie uses the term freak show to describe these two boys. And conveniently, one twin was good and one twin was evil. And that's kind of all that's ever said about these two boys. I guess one of the twins got sick, and since the two boys shared a liver, the sickness quickly spread to the other twin. And shortly thereafter, both twins died. Not wanting to admit the shame of having these freak show twins to the town at large, the farmer took his hacksaw and he sawed the twins in two, separating them, finally, after all these years. And in the town cemetery, he buried the good twin, and for the evil twin, he buried him in a shallow grave on his farmland property at the end of a road called Crybaby Lane. And the reason why this road earned the name Crybaby Lane is because apparently, in the middle of the night, you can drive down this road and you can hear a child crying, the ghost of the evil twin. And this kickstarts a whole thing where the older brother, Carl, wants to impress some girls by, sort of verifying the legend of Crybaby Lane. So he invites some girls out to the cemetery, and they find the gravesite for the good twin, the Mueller boy. And he plays a trick on them where he pretends that there's a ghostly voice coming from the gravestone to scare the girls because he thinks that will get him in with the girl he has a crush on. And obviously what actually happens is that he summons the spirit of the ghost buried in that gravestone. And as it turns out, the mortician reveals that there was actually a mix-up, that the good twin was buried on the farmer's farmland and the evil twin was buried in the cemetery in town. And what Carl has done is he has stirred up the spirit of the evil twin, who is now possessing members of the town one by one and making them do evil things. And what this basically means is that, slowly over the course of the movie, the entire town, one by one, person by person, kind of descends into chaos as everyone becomes possessed by this evil spirit. It doesn't matter if you're a kid, if you're an adult, or whatever. It's kind of almost like this invasion of the body snatchers infection that spreads throughout the town. The more the evil people, the possessed people come in contact with normal people, they spread the possession, and it spreads and it spreads and it spreads until, adults are lighting cars on fire in the street and, blowing up things and sort of, laughing evilly. Eventually, Carl himself even becomes possessed, and he starts, he tries to kill his little brother Andrew. Seriously, actually tries to kill him. And not only does he try to kill him, but he humiliates him first. And it's a legitimately humiliating scene. He leads his brother out to this cattle farm, and he makes his brother strip down to his underwear while him and a bunch of other possessed kids, throw cow pies at him. And then he locks his little brother Andrew into this stable with this violent bull, and the bull tries to gore him. And it's, this is what I'm saying when I say that this movie, even at 37 years old, it's pretty intense at points. You can definitely see how they got complaints from concerned parents that this was a little too much for children. And it kind of it escalates from there. There is one scene towards the end of the movie where Andrew learns about the good twin buried at the farm at the end of Crybaby Lane. And he is instructed by the mortician to go out to Crybaby Lane and try and free the spirit of the good twin so that the good twin can fight the evil twin, right? So Andrew and his friend steal a hearse. And, they're kids, right? They can't drive. Andrew admits he's 12 years old. He's not a big kid. He's not even close to driving age. And they're driving out to the farm, and they almost get run off the road by a police officer. The police officer himself has been possessed by the evil spirit, and he's not just trying to run the kids off the road or trying to arrest them for, speeding or driving a car without a license or whatever. He's trying to ram them off the road to kill them. And it's pretty obvious that's what he's doing. He's being malicious, he's being violent, he's attacking them. It's, again, pretty spooky. It's pretty scary. Legit scary for even adults. That would be kind of a weird scenario to be in. And purely by accident, they end up out at Crybaby Lane. They stumble upon the gravesite. Or they stumble upon the farm. And Andrew gets separated from his friend. They're in the middle of this big cornfield, right? And this piece of farm equipment starts up and starts coming after them. And again, very intense. This is legit horror movie territory. To have this big, this harvester come after you in this open cornfield, and it's being driven by the farmer who is possessed by the evil spirit. Andrew smartly diverts to where, he's out of the path of the harvester. But Andrew's friend runs back to the hearse and jumps inside, thinking that because he's in the car, he'll be safe. Instead, the harvester slams into the hearse at full speed, flips it over, the farm implement gouges into the windows shatter, the car is wrecked, and it seems very obvious that the kid who hid in the hearse is either seriously wounded or most likely dead. Again, Nickelodeon movie. Probably aired at like 7 p.m. Andrew runs off out into the cornfield. He gets lost. We'll say like 7 or 10 girls suddenly come out of the cornfield around him and surround him. They won't let him leave. They're around him on all sides. He's trapped. And this group of girls was among some of the first people to be possessed by the evil spirit. So you know they're bad news. And they all start taunting Andrew and they start laughing at him for being such a wuss, such a baby. And they say, we'll let you go if you play Kiss or Chi-Chi. And he's like, what is Chi-Chi? What are you talking about? But again, they have him surrounded on all sides, so he doesn't really have any bargaining chips. So he says, okay, I'll play Kiss or Chi-Chi. I'll kiss one of you. And one of the girls steps forward, and right as they're about to kiss, the girl opens her mouth, and a spider crawls out on her tongue. And all the other girls surrounding Andrew start cackling. Ha 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 ha. What's the matter? No kiss? And Andrew, obviously recoils in horror. Who wouldn't? An adult would recoil in horror. And then we learn what Chi-Chi is. The biggest, tallest, strongest girl in the group steps forward and takes a swing at Andrew. Straight up, haymaker, right hook, punch to kill. And Andrew takes off running because, this girl, she's so big that she made a space in the crowd when she stepped forward to sock him. And he takes off into the cornfield, and the girl takes off with him, and, the movie continues from there. It's one of those movies that is really incredible to think about. How did this get made? And the story about, how Crybaby Lane got made is that it was originally pitched as like a full-length, full-budget, $10 million theatrical movie. And, $10 million isn't like super high budget or anything like that when you consider that, Avengers Infinity War or whatever was like a $300 million budget movie or whatever. But $10 million will get you a movie. It'll be fine. What happened around that time is that this was right around Nickelodeon's big push into, the Nickelodeon Films era. This is where we got movies like Snow Day. This is, I don't even remember Nickelodeon's other live-action films, but it was this era, and a lot of them bombed. Most of them bombed. So they kind of got cold feet, and Crybaby Lane was apparently in production during this time, and Nickelodeon said, whoa, cool your jets, folks. This isn't a theatrical movie anymore. We're just going to put this on TV. And they slashed the budget from $10 million down to like $800,000. The movie probably got dramatically shortened. The version that's on YouTube right now is only about an hour long. So, you figure that it was probably like another 30 minutes of content in this movie that had to be cut down for it to air on TV. And, that's the story of how this movie got made, and probably why it's like so like genuinely scary at points is because this was probably going to be like a PG-13 movie in theaters, right? It was going to be like close to a real horror movie. And when it got scaled down for television, it kind of kept that mood, that vibe, that tone. But I think the creators of the movie, eventually realized that, hey, our movie is a little too intense for the kids that watch TV. We're going to have to do something about this. And what that actually means is, the biggest problem with the movie is that in between all of these scenes that are, genuinely kind of creepy, not necessarily, scream out loud terrifying or anything, but, genuinely creepy scenes, they insert this humor, this cheesy early 2000s humor that you'd see, we're talking Hey Dude, we're talking even then, Hey Dude was probably a pretty good show, Salute Your Shorts was a pretty good show. They were cheesy, but I don't think they were as cheesy as the humor in Crybaby Lane. It is really cheap humor, there's fart jokes in that movie. The older brother Carl, before he gets possessed, he's constantly cracking jokes about professional wrestling, about Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and you gotta be a big strong man if you want to win the champion's belt. It's that kind of thing, and it's kind of cringeworthy, like, to be perfectly honest with you. It's not great. And that humor is what really, like, drags the movie down so hard now. That and the fact that, like, you know, I talked about Carl and sort of his obsession with professional wrestling. A lot of the movie is also kind of Carl bullying his younger brother Andrew for no reason. It's very much like Carl's like trying to teach him to be a manly man, which means being loud and stupid and violent and, you know, doing whatever you want for any reason. And it's not fun because Carl never really gets redeemed for doing that. He never really gets punished for doing that. He's just like a gigantic jerk to his brother Andrew for no reason, and it never gets resolved. He just is a jerk. Even the end of the movie, after, you know, everything is dealt with and Carl becomes unpossessed, like one of the last things he tells Andrew is like, if you tell anyone that I apologized, I'm going to kick your butt. And the thing is, Carl never apologizes. He says he apologizes. He says, if you tell anyone I apologized, I'm going to kick your butt. But there's no apology that precedes that. He just says that, you know, he warns him, don't tell anyone I apologized. And it's weird. But yeah, that's Crybaby Lane. You know, not terrible, but a little outdated in some ways. It's the kind of movie where I feel like it could do really well with like a modern remake. Like make it like a true, proper, full theatrical movie. It could work like that. It was pitched like that. It kind of deserves, there are scenes and ideas in this movie that deserve better than it gets, let's say. But that's it for this podcast. That's everything I've watched, everything I've played. That's all the upcoming plans for the channel and the Patreon and everything else. I will see you guys, I don't know, a couple weeks from now, maybe. You know, it's not going to be very long until the next podcast. I kind of want to catch up a little bit for, you know, this podcast being so late. So stay tuned for me making up and figuring out what I'm going to do there. See you then. But, okay. Bye.
I do love a good statue toppling, unless the legs stay behind. Nothing takes the shine off a people's uprising like stubborn statue feet. It starts out all, death to tyrants! But then you gotta be like, sorry, we'll take care of the rest in the morning.